Well, I'm available to start at right tackle.
You can't see when I have clothes on.
All right. Well, there's not an even playing field. There's never been an even playing field. There never will be an even playing field.
What shampoo do you use on your hair?
You don't need to be Superman to play in this offense.
You're listening to The Red Zone.
Welcome, Badgers fans, to another episode of The Red Zone. We're here with our good old friend, Benjamin Worgull. How you doing, Ben?
Good to be back with you, Jason.
You're with badgersinsider.com now. Tell us a little bit about the website.
New website launched on August 31st. It's part of the USA Today network, and it's just like the old Badger Nation website. It's full coverage, Wisconsin football, basketball, a little bit of recruiting. The only difference is there's no subscription pay service anymore. It's all free content, so pick up your Wisconsin State Journal in the morning, and then after you read through that, log on to badgersinsider.com, and we'll supplement each other well.
Yeah. Well, looking toward this Badgers team, I mean, I don't know if we need to talk about the Rutgers game all that much. I mean, it's, if anything, I feel like it kind of made me sort of less optimistic that they can turn this around. It was a game that, you know, they didn't really play that well. Obviously, they played well enough to win, but there were, a lot of mistakes in there. A lot of kind of the offense definitely took a while to get going. Do you have any thoughts from the Rutgers game?
Well, I think whatever happened in that game you had to take with a grain of salt because Rutgers is so incredibly terrible. And I mean, with 8 straight losses, they're bottom of the Big Ten in virtually every category offensively. So you would expect the defense to have a better day. And they did. I thought through 2.5, 3 quarters, they played well. Fourth quarter, they kind of let things get away from them, which is a little disconcerting because I think since the Nebraska game, we've seen good flashes of this team. The first half against Michigan, spots against Illinois. I thought they played well at Northwestern, but the offense put them in some bad spots. They just haven't played a complete game yet. And maybe that's not as surprising considering the youth on this team to begin the year and now the injuries that have since come up as the season has worn on. I think the biggest takeaway is, like you said, offensively, this team, for whatever reason, just has not flown into a cohesive unit at any point this year, especially against a quality opponent. That's not what we saw on Saturday against Rutgers, but for Wisconsin not to put together a complete offensive performance against a team like that just makes you scratch your head because at the beginning of the year we looked at this team like, man, they have their running back who is 6th in the Heisman Trophy race back. They have a junior quarterback who started 2 years. They have this incredible offensive line. They have depth at wide receiver. There's so many talented weapons on this team. They should just blow everybody out. And that hasn't been the case. We thought that this team would be led by their offense, and I would argue that this team is being led by their defense. And entering the final 3 weeks of the year, that's a really shocking statement for me to say.
Yeah, and, I was talking to Kendrick Pryor earlier this week, and I asked him what's gone wrong with the passing game, because I remember he told me earlier in the year that they had a goal of having
breaking the touchdown
35
record,
passing touchdowns, and obviously they're going to fall way short of that. And I asked him, what's been wrong with the offense, the passing game, and kind of what happened here. And he just kind of paused for like 5 seconds and had no answer and just said, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. And I think that's kind of what you're saying is they should be better offensively than we've seen. And I don't think it all comes down to the quarterback issues, and that's been a big problem. There's been a lot of inconsistency with at the quarterback spot, but there's also I think the offensive line's been playing better. They've been protecting well, but the receivers don't seem to be getting open at the same rate as you would expect guys of that talent level to either. And it's just I don't know what it is. They just can't get it going because the rushing game is still there, and the offensive line is playing better and better as the season goes along. Jonathan Taylor still could reach the 2,000-yard mark.
Yeah, and what you said with Pryor speaks to some of the interactions I've had with some of the offensive linemen, that no one can give you a real clear-cut answer as to why this unit hasn't gelled to the point where they're putting up 40 points consistently, which is what we thought at the beginning of the year, that this would be a team that would just hit their stride from week 2 on. And you look at the offensive line play, it has gotten better, but I don't think it's been as dominant as we thought it would be. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's had to grind quite a bit, especially against those marquee opponents, against Northwestern, against Michigan, where he's struggled to perform adequately. You look at the wide receiver play, you have to wonder how much Quintez Cephas's absence has hurt this unit, because instead of Cephas getting doubled, that's put more pressure on A.J. Taylor to deliver. I think Danny Davis has come along a little bit, but just he's still just a sophomore. He didn't even play a full season last year, so he's still growing. Kendrick Pryor, the same thing. He is redshirt sophomore. He missed a good chunk of the beginning of last year and we're slowing his development. So these are still young wide receivers. They're still learning how to get open, how to make themselves a bigger target for the quarterback, and the quarterback play has been inconsistent. When Alex Hornibrook has been in, he's done some good things, but as we saw against Rutgers, he can do some things that just cannot happen, especially for a junior quarterback. And Jack Coan has played 2 games this year and is still getting into a rhythm for himself in his young career. So, offensively, they've been fairly healthy this year, which has been a good thing. But now the issues at quarterback is really going to make these final 3 weeks of the season interesting for where Wisconsin goes from here.
Yeah, the only guys they've really been missing offensively from a long-term perspective are Quintez Cephas and Xander Neville, like you said. And Neville doesn't really contribute in the passing game, much at all.
Blocking game is huge, though.
And yeah, I know. But when you talk about the passing game, I just don't buy that Quintez Cephas should make that big of a difference. I mean, he missed the last 4 or 5 games of last season. That Orange Bowl performance was without Cephas, when they went kind of crazy against that Miami defense. So I just don't understand.
Yeah, I'll give you credit for that, too, because the last month of the season, everyone stood up. I mean, Danny Davis was tremendous. I think A.J. Taylor took a nice step forward the last month of the year. And then people point to, well, you don't have Fumagalli. Jake Ferguson's done some really great things in the passing game when he's targeted. I mean, he hasn't been targeted very much the last 2 weeks, and I think that needs to change for this team going forward. You need to get him more involved in the passing attack, and it's a great enigma that we are trying to figure out what happened to this offense in 2018, because it's really cost Wisconsin the chance to do a lot of things really well this year. Yeah, and
I agree with you that I think they should try to get Ferguson more involved. Like, don't wait till 3rd down to try to split him out wide. Maybe try to do some more things with him on 1st and 2nd down to kind of get him going. I think I would do that. But no. Going into this Penn State game, I guess it's the 3rd straight week, really, that Alex Hornibrook has been questionable with a concussion. Now, he came back last week, but then had hit his head on the turf there at the end of the first half. From what you've seen from Jack Coan, is there a whole lot of difference with him out there than Hornibrook?
Well, we watched him in practice, and when you see him in practice, you see a player that has some mobility and has some confidence. And that's one thing that, from watching practices with you over the last couple of years, when Jack makes a mistake in practice, he has that ability to step up on the next play and make a really good throw or make a really good read or a really good decision. The one thing that has stood out to me about Jack through 2 weeks is he has taken care of the football through the air. He has not forced things. He has not made many bad throws, and that's the exact opposite of Alex Hornibrook. Hornibrook has made some decisions this year that just make you want to pull your hair out, and by our Twitter notifications, a lot of fans feel the same way. I'm anxious to see what Jack can do over the course of the remainder of the season. And should Alex play this week? Will Alex play this week? No, I don't think Alex is going to play this week, and I'd be interested to see if Alex returns at all this regular season, because one concussion is one thing. 2 in such a short time period, that has to be somewhat a cause for concern for this staff, for the medical staff, and for Alex long term, because that's what Paul has always preached. You want the long-term health in the best interest of the player. So we'll see Jack this weekend. I'll be interested to see how many chances they take with Jack. I thought the playbook was very dubbed down against Northwestern, and against Rutgers in the second half, they didn't need to throw the ball. They just ran the ball 13 times. They built their lead, and that was that. And then Jack threw just a little bit here and there. I think you need to let Jack open up the field, throw the football, try to balance out this offense to try to get Penn State off their edges. Because if you load the box against Jonathan Taylor, it's just going to be a long day in State College.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we saw in that Northwestern game, they really they were really careful with the situations they put him in, and they weren't going to ask him to do too much.
And that's understandably so for a player who he hadn't even played since the regular season finale against Minnesota a year ago, and he didn't really take any meaningful reps. All those cleanup games were blowouts where he just handed the ball off and maybe threw some passes here or there. So this was his first major action against a very, very good defense that Northwestern has. So you can understand why they're being cautious. I thought they were too cautious. I don't think they took enough chances down the field. You have 3 weeks left. You need a miracle to get to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. now is not the time to be playing with kid gloves anymore. Let's see what this guy can do, and maybe this can help you figure out some things moving into the rest of this season and into next year as well with what your offense could be.
Yeah, one interesting thing that Coan has told us in the past couple of weeks is that he feels like in his first start against Northwestern is that he was maybe checking down a little bit too much. He needs to spend a little more time going through his progression, and so that's another thing too. I mean, it may have looked a little bit more conservative because when they did drop him back to pass, he was checking down maybe a little bit too quickly. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe with a couple weeks time, a little bit more practice, if he can, if he does kind of go through with that and start to look.
And all that is
more.
Completely understandable. But this goes back to the point where we talked about with the wide receivers. These wide receivers need to fight a little bit more to get open. I think that you look at the Northwestern game, you look at the tape, there were very little separation for the quarterback to make those throws, no matter who the quarterback is. And this is going to be a test this weekend on the road. Wisconsin played really well on the road in the game against Iowa, but has not fared well since then. You got embarrassed at Michigan, and I would argue probably got embarrassed at Northwestern. You cannot go to probably the second toughest team on their schedule this year and lay another egg. I think there's a lot at stake for this team confidence-wise that you need to start building upon things instead of this up and down carousel that we've been on here the last month and a half or so.
Now, I'm not going to pick Wisconsin to win this game. I think I just made my prediction for the paper, and I think I picked a 15-point Penn State win. But I do kind of see the path for Wisconsin staying in this game. I mean, you look at Penn State's defense isn't really one of the top units in the country or anything like that. Mm-hmm. They've given up a lot of yards against the run. I think for Wisconsin that I can see a path where they keep grind it out on the ground, keep Penn State's offense off the field. If they're able to run the ball well against this team and do that, and maybe Trace McSorley, who really had to be taken out of this last game against Michigan because of he was really hobbled. If he's not 100%, and maybe they can't kill Wisconsin with the read option, because I think that would be a huge issue if McSorley is healthy. Is that this team has not played well against the read option in a lot of moments this season, and that's Penn State's offense right there. But if McSorley's a little hobbled and they can run the ball, I mean, maybe there's a path where they can pull an upset here.
Yeah, we saw what a healthy Trace McSorley can do early in the year. I mean, they looked fantastic, even in their losses. The loss to Ohio State, then the next week to Michigan State. They had leads in the fourth quarter, were playing well. Then McSorley gets hurt against Iowa, and then comes back last week, and they just absolutely looked horrible against Michigan. Now, Michigan, as we've come to find out, is really good, and they are probably that game against Ohio State in a couple weeks is going to be very entertaining television with Michigan. Having a path now to get to Indianapolis, but you look at that game itself. Penn State's offense just looked like a shell of itself without a healthy McSorley, and so you have to wonder now what his health is going to be moving into Saturday, and you have to wonder what kind of Penn State offense will Wisconsin's defense see. And Wisconsin's defense has gotten healthier, and I mean Dakota Dixon came back last week was key. Isaiah Loudermilk came back last week was key. You're starting to see this unit regain some of their key personnel. And you're going to have some depth now at the defensive line. You're going to have some options in the secondary. Your inside linebackers and Colleen Edwards are playing phenomenal right now. But the key is, and the key has been all season long for Wisconsin, can you get pressure on the quarterback? And if you can hit McSorley a couple times early, that can make a world of difference for this team. There is a path, certainly. I don't think this is going to be a game where it's a 100% chance that Penn State wins. I give Wisconsin maybe a 20%, 25% chance. But they have to limit the big plays. You need to balance out the offense, and you have to let Jack Coan take some chances. You need to take some chances to win on the road against Penn State, a team that really has beaten you up pretty good over the last handful of years.
Yeah, and the pass rush you mentioned is interesting because they were able to get a lot more pressure against Rutgers, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, their line's not great. They stopped the run in that game better than they have all season. That put Rutgers in a lot of third and long situations. So they were able to bring 5-6 guys a lot more often in that game, and that's going to be a little more difficult against Penn State.
There's a big difference between Penn State's offense and Rutgers' offense.
And are they going to be able to get Penn State in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 all that often? I think that's a big question too. If you got to be able to stop the run to get in those situations where you can put a little pressure on McSorley too. So that's going to be really interesting. Now, I wrote a story on this on madison.com earlier this week, but going over the Big Ten West scenarios for Wisconsin here, I think a lot of people have kind of written this off, but I mean, it's not out of the question. I mean, I think if they're able to win this, and I think the biggest key for this week, even more so than Wisconsin winning this game, is Iowa beating Northwestern. I think if Northwestern wins this week, it's over no matter what, because that would require Northwestern to lose back-to-back games to Minnesota and Illinois, and I just don't think that's going to happen. But if you get an Iowa victory this week and you beat Penn State, suddenly you're looking at a situation where you win your last 2 games, and all you need is Northwestern to one upset against Northwestern, and you've made it. And even if you lose to Penn State, I think you can still get in a 3-way tie with Iowa and Northwestern and win that based on the record against the West. So I think that, even if they lose this, as long as Iowa wins, that you can hope for maybe an extra Purdue loss, another Northwestern loss, and there's at least a long shot possibility there, even if they lose this game. But I guess a long-winded way to ask you, do they still have a chance in the West here, or is it?
So you're saying there's a chance? They have to worry about themselves first. I mean, they need to start playing better football. I mean,
we don't have to worry about it.
I mean, no, we don't. We just have to be there, and we have to make sure our fingers are warm. Wisconsin needs, if they want to win the Big Ten, they need to start playing better football, clean and simple. I mean, that's your breaking news headline of this podcast, because the way Wisconsin's playing now, no matter if they somehow magically find their way into Indianapolis, they're going to get their pants beaten off against whoever comes out of the East, whether it's going to be Ohio State or Michigan. I mean, Wisconsin just is not playing at a level that's even close to their preseason number 4 ranking, which I thought was high to begin with. But that's a story for talk about months ago. You look at the scenarios, and you're right. It all comes down to Wisconsin take care of their business and trying to figure out a way for Northwestern to lose 2 of their final 3 games. And Iowa has been kind of one of those typical Iowa teams where you expect more from them, and they are losing games that they shouldn't. Northwestern is starting to play better football. They played fairly well against Notre Dame last week, obviously beat Wisconsin, so they have a ton of confidence now after their rough early start. It's going to be a fascinating weekend, but Wisconsin needs to play better, and certainly a win this weekend would go a long way to gain some momentum, because that next game at Purdue is going to be no cupcake either.
Do you think it's a real advantage for Wisconsin that Penn State really doesn't have much to play for here? I mean, they're out of it in the East. They're 3 games back in Michigan with 3 to go, and Wisconsin at least has this hope to, if they pull off this upset, to get back in the race, and maybe, especially with the 35-point loss to Michigan last week, that kind of completely knocked them out of it. Maybe they're not really up for this game.
Yeah, that's a great one too. I mean, that's the age-old question. After you get absolutely embarrassed, how do you come back the next week? Do you come back motivated to kind of redeem yourself, or does it just knock all the wind out of your sails? Like you mentioned, Penn State let some games go early in the year. They had some great chances to win and let them go, and now you absolutely get demoralized. And Penn State is kind of in Wisconsin's boat. High expectations come into the year, hope to get to Indianapolis to defend their crown, and they haven't come anywhere close, just with all the inconsistencies they have. So it's the Inconsistency Bowl this Saturday between these 2 programs, and it'll be interesting to see who will win the first 15 minutes. I think whichever team wins the first 15 minutes is probably going to win this football game. And
bold prediction there.
Yeah, I sort of. Can Penn State come out early and set the tone in front of their home base, early kickoff, crowd that's probably like a lot of Wisconsin fans are just kind of, already waved the white flag on the year. It'll be interesting to see what teams we'll see on Saturday, especially with this offense with Wisconsin and what Jack Coan will be able to do under center.
35-20 is my pick for a Penn State victory. What do you say?
Well, I'll pick Penn State to win. I think they're 8-point favorites.
Yeah.
Close.
I think it's up to 9 now, actually.
Okay, close game. The first 30 minutes, giving Wisconsin fans hope, and then I think the third quarter, I think the athleticism of Penn State will take over. We'll go Penn State by 10. I think it's going to be one of those games where maybe Wisconsin gets a late touchdown and make it look a little bit more respectable, but I have a hard time seeing this Wisconsin offense finally figure it out, especially in front of 100,000 plus fans up in Pennsylvania.
What bowl game do you think we're going to see? It's really
I think a lot depends on the next 2 weeks, because a lot of these bowl games know that Wisconsin fans travel well no matter what, but how well will they travel for a 7-5 team? I've seen predictions anywhere from the Citrus Bowl to the Red Box Bowl in California to the New Era Pinstripe Bowl. Gator Bowl in Jacksonville would be great. Spend New Year's Eve in sunny Florida, but I think if I had to guess, I think they'd go to New York, play in the Pinstripe Bowl against ACC team. So December 27th against in the Bronx. Book it.
Yeah, you do those bowl projections every week on madison.com, and like I saw the Citrus Bowl one this week, and I
think Jerry Palm just fell asleep.
Like, what is going on?
I think he's worried about his metrics for basketball. Yeah, CBS has had Wisconsin in the Citrus Bowl a lot over the course of the last month, and I just don't understand how the Badgers at this point can be pegged for one of the top Big Ten bowl games on their slate.
They'd have to win out to have a chance at that.
Right, yeah. And if they win out, they'll have beaten two really good teams on the road, and they'll be a more attractive option at 9-3. But
even then, they might not get to that point.
Right, yeah. So I think best case scenario, Wisconsin goes 2-1 down the stretch, gets them to 8-4, and I think that will be an attractive option for New York or Jacksonville for the Gator Bowl. I think right now, if I was a betting man, I'd plan on one of those two bowl games.
Yeah, it is interesting too, because Northwestern team that's probably going to finish ahead of them in the conference, but they have 3 non-conference losses, and a lot of the times these go by overall record.
Right.
So Northwestern could be 7-5 overall, but
Northwestern could win the Big Ten and not be a team outside the Big Ten this year. How crazy is that?
That is pretty crazy. That's a good point. I hadn't really even thought about that. Mm-hmm. Wow. I think I'm going to predict the Pinstripe Bowl too at this point, but I wouldn't mind San Francisco, honestly. That would be never been there. It'd be a nice one.
What a cruel irony that would be for Wisconsin to go play in the Red Box Bowl, and then a week later, the national championship game is played on that same field. A game that I think a lot of Wisconsin fans thought that the Badgers would be in this year, right or wrong. Just to be kind of a cool twist of irony.
I know there are high expectations, but I hope fans didn't expect them to be in the national championship this year.
No, I think coming into this year, you looked at this team and you thought, okay, they have the potential to be a really good unit, but they had to figure things out defensively, and this kind of comes full circle. And defensively, this team, in my opinion, has played above expectations. I think that they've been a really good unit. Now, certainly there's some deficiencies, but you have to like the progression of the younger players. You have to like some of the things the defensive line has done, but this offense is just so bizarrely inconsistent, and that's, I think, on Paul Christ's to-do list prior to the year, figuring out a flow offensively was probably way down on his list. And it's just been one of those major questions this year. Why didn't Wisconsin's offense ever become that unit they all should have become based on what they did the last month of last year?
That's Ben Worgull. You can follow him on Twitter at the Badger Nation. I guess you don't have to hound the guy who has at Badger Nation anymore.
No, I'll let him be.
maybe find the guy who has at Badgers Insider, right?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I haven't looked at that yet. See, that's why I come on this podcast, to learn something. Thank you.
Yeah, well, check out badgersinsider.com and look at Ben's stuff, and follow me on Twitter at Jason_Galloway, and keep visiting madison.com as well for all of your Badgers football coverage. Thanks for joining me, Ben.